Hello and welcome to one and all. So in the previous class, we checked out what are all the causes for income inequalities in the country. And let us check out in this class what are all the remedial measures that are undertaken by the government to rectify the income inequalities. See, one of the main objectives of Indian 5-year plan is, apart from what should be the rate of growth of national income, what should be the growth rate in the per capita income, apart from all those objectives, one of the main objectives of Indian 5-year plan is to reduce or to control the income inequalities in our country. Okay, so for that, in order to achieve that, some remedial measures programs were undertaken by the government. So let us check out what are all the policies or the programs implemented by the government in the country. So the first one was the land reforms and redistribution of agricultural land. So we have seen that one of the reason for uh, inequalities in the land, agricultural land in our countries because of the zamindari system introduced by the British government. So after attaining the independence, what the government did was, the first thing what the government did was, between 1951 to 60, the government introduced the land reforms by abolishing all the intermediaries. In the meaning, in the sense that the government removed all the zamindars and all the other intermediaries in the agricultural land, and the government imposed a ceiling in the sense that what should be the maximum area of land that could be held by a farmer. So that's one of the most important land reform measures introduced in our country. So the government imposed the ceiling, mentioning what should be the maximum acres or area of land that can be held by a farmer. So all those excess land were taken over by the government, and those extra land were redistributed to the all the small and marginal farmers in the country. But only thing is, it's the implementation of land reforms in our country was lethargic. It was not that much successful. But to a certain extent, the redistribution of land took place in the country. We don't have that zamindari system, the intermediary system in our country. So couple of majority of the farmers benefited, but there are certain sections of the farmers could not benefit also. Okay, so this is what the government did. Anyway, this measure was introduced by the government to rectify the mistake of concentration of landed property in the agricultural sector. Okay. After independence, in order to rectify the mistake of concentration of landed property in the rural area due to zamindari system, the government introduced land reforms. That is, abolishing the zamindari system and all other intermediaries. There are different varieties of intermediaries, zamindar, jagirdars, so many systems, zamindari system, rightwari system, mahalwari system. So many types of intermediary system were existing in our country. So all those intermediaries were abolished. Impose land ceiling That is, what is should be the putting a ceiling. What should be the maximum area of land that can be held by a farmer? And after imposing the ceiling, taking the excess land for from the big owners, taking the excess land and redistributing to the small and marginal farmers. But only thing is, it was not very successful, but it was not very successful, as even today about 40% of the agricultural land belongs to top 5% of the landlords. So the remaining 95% of the small and marginal farmers, they are sharing 60% of the agricultural land. Okay. So the even though the government introduced the land reforms, it's not very successful. Anyway, that is one program the government has introduced. Then the second, what the government, this is in the urban areas. The first one, what the government has introduced, was the land reforms for the check the unequal distribution of land in the rural area. Then we have seen, isn't it, the concentration of assets in the private sector. So in order to rectify that mistake, the government did something called as the control over monopolies and restrictive trade policies. So we have seen that because of the easy availability of credit, the private sector, they kept on, some of the entrepreneurs, industrialists, the big industrialists, traders and all, they kept on expanding their business. And over a period of time, they assumed the position of a monopoly. Okay. So, and they were, I mean, exploiting the, they are indulging in some malpractice, not malpractices, some unhealthy practices, in the sense that they were expanding their businesses at the cost of others. So in order to control the expansion of the monopolies in the private sector, the government introduced an act called as the MRTP Act, that is the Monopoly Restrictive Trade Practices Act. So that means there were some limitations, like if a person is having a investment of already 100 crore investment is there, and still if that private sector wants to expand his business, want to invest more than 100 crore, or already that person is having a 25% of the market share. So still if he wants to have more than the 25% of the market share, so those kind of private entrepreneurs, they were categorized as a monopoly. So the government passed an act saying that beyond this level, the government will not issue any licenses for them to expand. So in that way, the government was controlling the monopolies. Okay, so that there will not be too much of concentration of assets in the hands of the private monopolies. So that is the control over monopolies and restrictive trade practices. Okay. So basically, this monopolies tendency. So if the monopolies keeps on expanding, their profit share will keep on expanding. So the country has to prevent that expansion of monopolies. So monopolies tendency has to be prevented to reduce income inequalities in the country. So the government of India passed an act known as MRTP Act, that is monopolies restricting the activities. What activities? Trade practices. So they cannot expand their business, they cannot expand their trade beyond a certain level. So Monopolies Restrictive Trade Practices Act in 1969 to curb the expansion of monopolies. But again, recently with the liberalization process, it was not, I mean, the act itself was replaced by some other act which is more liberal, Competition Act. And also with the announcement of liberalization, again the government is favoring only the private sector and the monopolies. So that is the problem now. But now with liberalization, the MNCs are being favored. The MNCs with more and more, so globalization and all, more and more uh, mergers or acquisitions, all these will happen, isn't it? Including from abroad, more and more mergers and acquisitions are favored. So which is again further increasing the income inequalities in the country. Increasing the inequalities. Okay. So unless the government globalization process, if you are participating in globalization, we have to favor the MNCs. So the mergers, collaboration with the foreign companies, all these are necessary if you are in the process or if you are participating in the globalization. So with all this, the new economic reforms, again that whatever that monopolies tendencies which was happening at that time before 1969, again it is the country is favoring only that the income inequalities are further increasing in the country. Okay. So that is the, anyway, that measure have been introduced by the government. So the third measure was employment and wage policy. So different employment schemes were being introduced by the government since fourth 5-year plan. Okay, and later from the sixth 5 plan, it became more intense. So from fourth 5-year plan, so fourth 5-year plan, it was between 1969-70 to 1973-74 plan. The government has been initiating several employment programs. So this is like employment programs. All these will give at least a temporary job for the people. I mean, when temporary income will be provided to the people, or monthly or daily or a certain number of days. So most of these programs include development of rural infrastructure, like construction of roads, construction of building, construction of hospitals. So all this, like that, the rural construction works will go on, and during and for a specific period of days. So at least for that specific period of days, the wages will be paid to those rural poorer sections of the population, whoever is willing to work. So they will be getting a certain amount of wages. So directly employment or directly providing the wages, the daily laborers, the casual laborers, the construction workers, isn't it? So at least for a certain period of time, they will get their wages. So some amount of money income will be there for those poorer sections of the population. So like that, several programs were implemented by the government starting from the fourth 5-year plan. So the first scheme introduced was something called as the crash scheme for rural employment. So the name itself says it is for uh, employing the rural poor, and it is a crash scheme only for a certain period. Crash course, we'll say, no, only for a certain period of time. And the next scheme what the government introduced was something called as the drought prone area program. So depending upon the areas, different programs are being implemented in the country. The drought prone area program is there are certain areas which are always affected by drought. So nothing can be cultivated during that period of time, isn't it? So what else can be done in that particular area? So that people will become employable and they will get some program has to be identified for the areas which are always prone to drought. So during that period of time, people should be employable and they will get certain amount of wages. So like that, which are all the areas which are affected by drought, which are hill area development programs, like that, different programs were initiated by the government. And apart from these are all uneducated. Even for the educated people also, the government introduced some program called as the self-employment schemes for educated unemployed and also for engineers. See, it is not that only the uneducated people are not getting the jobs. Even the educated people are also not finding the jobs. So because for they can be starting, they can start their own employment, self-employment scheme. So like for that, training will be provided for the those educated people and engineers, etc., so that they can start earning some income. So one popular program the government introduced was something called as TRISOM, training the rural youth for self-employment. So like that, different programs for different categories of people, different areas, the government initiated the employment programs. Okay. And something called as another program is food for work program. So this food for work program, mainly the construction workers, the daily laborers. So at the end of the day, they will be provided at the end of the day or per month, depending upon the contract. Food for work program is partly they will be paid in the form of wages, money, and the remaining part they will be paid in the form of food grains like pulses and rice, like that. That is a food for work program. But the problem is, whatever the programs introduced in the fourth plan, it was very temporary. The government did not then and there suddenly thinking about, okay, this is, let us start initiating this program. So the government was not thinking on a from a long term point of view. It was all very short lived and it was very temporary. So that's why they did not survive for a long period of time. But after, from the sixth plan again, end of the fifth plan and sixth plan again, the government started more employment generation programs in a more serious manner. Okay. So, but these programs were short lived, but the concept remains the same. The same kind of program the government is even initiating today also. Basically, construction, rural, developing the infrastructure, both in the rural areas as well as in the urban areas, employing the laborers, people for a certain period of time till the project is completed. At least for that particular days, they will be having certain amount of income. So that is the employment generation programs. So but later, during sixth plan, that is from 1980 to 85. During sixth plan, more intense in the sense more permanent. continuously running, the projects that are continuously running. So like that kind of programs are devised by the government. More intense employment and poverty alleviation programs were undertaken. So this include such as one of the most important poverty alleviation program introduced by the government was something called as the integrated rural development program. This program is not in action now, but at that time it was one of the considered to be popularly known as IRDP. It was considered to be one of the most important poverty eradication program in the country. Then something called as the National Rural Employment Program. Actually, the programs are all same, only the names keep on changing. The activity, the work happens to be the same, but under different names. Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program, that is RLE, GP, etc. Okay, and very recently, the government introduced a program. This is the program which is still running now. That is MNREGA program. More recently, the central government introduced the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. That is MNREGS. So this is supposed to be one of the most ambitious program of the country. It's still running. This is the only program which is currently running in the country. So which is the most ambitious scheme introduced in the post-independent period to alleviate poverty. See, this MNREGA program, it is the main aim is to provide at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment. At least in a household, if any adult is willing to work any unskilled work, unskilled typical manual work. So if any household, any adult in a household is volunteering to work for unskilled manual work, so he will be provided guaranteed that 100 days of work will be provided to that particular adult in a particular household. Okay, and accordingly the wages will also be paid to the, at least for 100 days he will be getting the wages. So that is the MNREGA program. Okay, so the next measure introduced by the government is, and as I mentioned, the work happens to be the same. Everything is development of infrastructure, construction activities, mostly it is construction work activities, and only the names keep on changing. Okay, then the next program measure initiated by the government was social security measure. So the meaning of social security measure means providing some kind of monetary assistance from the by the government to any person who is unemployed, who is not earning any amount of income, or a person who is earning very meager income. So that is the meaning of social security. But as far as the developed countries are concerned, they have a very strong social security measures. So they are all having something called doles, like unemployment allowances or the minimum income for each family. So like that, very strong social security measures are available for in almost all the developed countries. But in India, that kind of strong social security measures are not available to all the sections of the population, but at least some kind of measures are available for the people who are employed in the organized sector of the country. Okay, so some of the, so that's what, like employment provident scheme, state insurance schemes, like that. Some kind of programs are available mainly for the employees in the organized sector. So although India does not have a comprehensive means covering everything, social security measures like some of the developed countries, some measures are there for the, especially for the workers in the organized sector, the workers in the organized sector, such as first one is the something called as the workman's workmen's compensation act. So this is, and I mean, suppose if the worker met with some accident or anything, some mishap happens in the factory, so some kind of, so he has to get the treatment, isn't it? So for that, compensation will be provided under this act. So that is a workmen's compensation act. And then there's something called as the maternity benefit act. So this is covering the women employees, providing income or entitlement, some kind of benefit to the mothers for a certain period of time, both before the birth of the child and certain period after the birth of a child. And the next one is the employees provident fund act. This is a kind of savings uh, done. It is like a form of compulsory savings done for the on behalf of the employees. So at the time after their, at the time of retirement, they will be paid in the form of lump sum. And most important act passed by the government was the Employees State Insurance Act. So this Employees State Insurance Act, this is very important program. It includes I mean, it includes so many benefits like insured work medical benefits, disability benefit. So all those are covered in the Employee State Insurance Act, so which is a more comprehensive. I mean, that's what it is, including so many benefits. So for example, this is the Workmen's Compensation Act. Only if there's any injury at the time of working in the factories, only that it is covered. But here it is covering so many other things also. So that's why it is a comprehensive measure which entitles the insured workers to medical benefits, disability benefit, etc. Okay, so there are some more points there, couple of more points are there, which I'll continue with my next class. Okay, I hope you're all understanding what are all the measures and the concept and the meaning of each and every act and each and every measure. Okay, so if you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any doubts, please mention in the comment box. Okay, so until my next class, next video, take care. Bye bye.